August 20th, year 1966, a young boy flies a kite atop a quiet hill of Morro do Vintem. He notices something strange lying among the grass. At first, he thinks it's just a pile of clothes, but as he approaches, sees, and that's my cat. He sees two men. Dressed in formal suits and waterproof coats, their eyes covered with homemade lead masks. They lie motionless, side by side. No signs of struggle, no signs of life, just silence. These men were Miguel José Viana and Manuel Pereira da Cruz. Electronics technicians, ordinary men whose final hours would plunge Brazil into most enduring mysteries. Hello, Lighthousers. This case, I'm so excited to share this one with you because it has everything. It has mystery, it's unsolved, it smells like aliens, it smells like cult, so let's just start. Friends Miguel José Viana, who was at the age of 34 when he was found, and Manuel Pereira da Cruz, who was at the age of 32, lived in Campos dos Goitacazes. Probably not gonna pronounce it correctly, but it was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. They owned a small home-based TV repair shop. Miguel was married to Elsa and Manuel was married to Nelly. So they were also well regarded in campus, especially for their expertise in the electronics and TV repair. But behind the closed doors, boys would be boys, and they would like to play around with electronics and experiments. Except that these experiments would not be games. They would be huge and cause trouble all around. So May 12, year 1966, at Tafona Beach, a peaceful stretch of sand where families enjoyed their quiet time. That night, Miguel, Manuel, and their friend Elcio were conducting experiments along the shore. What experiments, and if they were experiments, actually, we will talk about that a little bit later, but at around 9 p.m., a massive explosion shattered the calm. Flames lit up the sky, visible from over 10 kilometers away. Windows shattered, dogs barked, people ran outside witnessing a terrifying spectacle. A fiery ball hovered over the water before plunging into the beach. The rumor at that time was that a flying saucer went down into the ocean, and the local says that he first saw a lightened ship in the distance, and then the ship was simply gone. The explosion draws attention from Navy, which starts an investigation. Detective Fernandez arrives at the beach to investigate and sees marks on the sand that resemble huge tire dents around 35 centimeters wide, and he senses a strong sulfur smell coming from these markings. He reports to his superiors. They also learn that the men were making some experiments on that night on the beach. So one of the options they start to inspect is that it was the result of their work, but it had not been proven. So still, some think up to nowadays that this case was actually a UFO case. Or there is another option. Knowing how these men were into spiritualism too, they maybe on that night called out something to come and show up on that day. Or, well, let's look into this because this Atafona Beach incident is just a small piece of a puzzle of a larger mystery that we are about to discuss in today's video. What is interesting is that people observed something about Miguel and Manuel after this event. They were unusually excited and nervous afterwards, as if they had glimpsed a secret that no one else could comprehend. Witnesses described them as more introspective, more secretive, and they spoke in hushed tones and began preparing for something that no one understood. Preparations that would culminate 3 months later on the hill of Morro do Vintem. June of the year 1966. It seemed like the men were still continuing their experiments on something. We don't know on something. This time they did their experiments in Manuel's home in his garden. Pipes, wires, and metal fragments littered the yard. Neighbors whispered about experiments, energy devices, or spiritual rituals. The men remained silent, focused, and secretive, their fascination with the unknown knowing more pronounced. So there was something going on there. A month passes, and now we are in August of the year 1966. Manuel wakes his wife up in the middle of the night and tells her that the next morning he and Miguel are going to São Paulo to buy some used car and some electronic components for the shop. He packs a big amount of money in one bag, and in a separate package he puts 2 towels. Next morning, one of Miguel's and Manuel's friends takes them by car to a bus station. But instead of taking a bus to São Paulo, as they said they were going there, they actually went to another city called Niterói. Red flag. This was the first lie. And at around 2 p.m. they arrive at Niterói. It's raining cats and dogs out there, but it does not bother them, and at that moment they are heading towards one of the electronic shop called Fluscop, where they are greeted by the owner, Mr. Filho, whom they knew personally from before. While they are in the shop, they talk to the owner and they ask for specific components from Philips that were not in stock in the shop. Mr. Filho found this request quite weird because Miguel and Manuel, being experienced technicians, should know that these kind of components usually are not available in a place like Niterói. Afterwards, logic but still weird, they go to plastics and rubber store called Casa Brasilia. There they buy raincoats, but they do not put them on. They just buy them and take with them. And when they leave the shop, people who saw them said that they looked like they're in kind of hurry. Other accounts say that they were more than in a hurry. They actually looked a little bit agitated, which later led to speculation that they might have met someone in between the electronic shop and the raincoat shop. Now, at around 3:15 p.m., both men are spotted in the local bar near Vintem Hill. They are served by the daughter of the bar owner. She recalls that they specifically asked for a bottle of a very cold mineral water. Both men were in a hurry. However, they took time to wait for the receipt of the purchase of the mineral water, as they planned to return the empty bottle and get a small refund afterwards, meaning they were planning to return back to that bar afterwards. So they leave the bar and they head towards Andrea Pinto Street, which is like at the end of the Vintem Hill. That's the hill where this case is going to evolve. Now, here are some speculations of what happened next. They definitely were heading towards the mountain, actually up the mountain, but there are like 8 paths leading towards the mountain, and up to nowadays, we still don't know which of these 8 paths they chose on that night. And so, whichever path they took, they managed to reach the top of the hill. And since we don't know which of the 8 paths they chose, we cannot say exact time when they actually reached the top. But it is estimated at around 4:30 p.m. Also important, we don't know if they got there alone. We do not know what actually happened to them afterwards. What we do know is that on the next morning of August the 18th, a boy who is chasing small animals in the area, she got her snack. Who is chasing small animals in the area notices 2 men lying on the ground. So he was a little bit scared of the view, and he wasn't really sure if the men were alive or dead. And also he didn't risk approaching them since he didn't know these guys. But this boy decides to go to the house of the closest policeman who was living in that area, Mr. Castro. And he goes, knocks on the door and tells what he saw. He saw 2 men lying on the ground and it looked very suspicious. But this story somehow didn't stick with this policeman. He doesn't really take this boy seriously and didn't even think to check out if this is really true. Few days later, on August 20th, in the afternoon, another boy was flying a kite in the same area. The kite catches a tree, and when he decides to get the kite down, he also comes across of the bodies of 2 men. Then the boy gets back to the town and calls the police department to tell what he saw. Since it was already getting dark and the weather conditions are pretty bad, Oscar Nunez, the officer who took the call, decided not to climb the mountain on that evening. The rescue team and the police started off only on the next morning. It was August 21st to be precise. But because of the bad weather, it took them 2 hours to get there. Once they reach the top of the mountain, they come across the most bizarre, mysterious, and simply eerie view. They find Miguel and Manuel both deceased. They were wearing identical formal suits and the raincoats that we know they purchased earlier. The identification was quite quick since they had their IDs on them. Imagine a scene. Two almost identical looking men lying on their backs on a spread of leaves, signs of blood on their mouths and nose, also a bit on these leaves. These leaves are specific. They are a form of a tree called pinoba tree. The leaves of this tree is super steady, and the only way how to cut them is probably by using a knife, but there is no sign of knife nearby. On the scene, several pretty weird objects were found, and here's a list of them. A bottle of mineral water, almost empty. Improvised cups made of aluminium foil. A package of 2 towels, a wedding ring tied to a reading glass inside Miguel's jacket, a wristwatch stored inside a pocket of Miguel's pants, money hidden in plastic bag with Miguel's pants, and money in Miguel's jacket. A folded unused handkerchief with embroidered initials AMS. The receipt for the water bottle, matches and cigarettes inside Miguel's jacket, 2 unused bus tickets from Niteroi to campus, so heading towards home, square pieces of cellophane paper with some substance, a newspaper from August 17th, 2 lead masks nearby their bodies. The crudely made masks are shaped like sunglasses but are made out of pure lead and have no eye holes. A handwritten paper note with some electronic quotations, a handwritten paper note with letters and numbers that look like a code. Also, you can find there a handwritten paper note with written instructions found inside Miguel's pocket. A handwritten paper note with some medicine recipes. A dirty paper note with the word Bansai. None of this makes any sense at all, especially if you look into the content of the notes that they had with them. For example, the instructions of one of the papers said, I quote, 16:30, be at a specified place. 18:30, ingest capsules after the effect. Protect metals, wait for signal, mask. Since there were no punctuation marks, you could read it differently. For example, ingest capsules after the effect. Could be also ingest capsules, full stop, after the effect, meaning there will be an effect after that. I don't know. Or simply as one sentence, meaning that there will be some effect, and after that you need to ingest the capsules. I don't know. Also pretty weird is the part where it says protect metals. Is this why Miguel had his wedding ring and wristwatch in his pockets and not on him? We don't know. Another note said, I quote, Sunday, 1 capsule after the meal. Monday, 1 capsule in the morning while fasting. Tuesday, 1 capsule after the meal. Wednesday, 1 capsule when lying down. When they reached the top of the mountain was August 17, and it was the Wednesday. So if we trace all of these instructions backwards, this means that the last capsule when lying down in the leaves was the last capsule. This means also that they started to take these capsules on Sunday, which was August the 14th. So we kind of now have the dates. So many odd things to consider and understand here. And of course, the main question, how did they die? The investigation was led by Mr. Bittenward, and the bodies were then taken to the coroner's office, who on that day was super busy. And this, in turn, led to some slop lines that caused a lot of damage in the solving process of this case. The autopsy was actually done not by the coroner himself, but by his assistant, who actually didn't have any legal rights to do that. Anyways, he reports no injuries or signs of violence on the body. The next day, Miguel's brother Herval goes to coroner's office to claim both bodies, and they are buried few days later in Campos. And then a curious reporter whose name I couldn't really find, but allegedly he was doing a research on this case, and he went to the coroner's office to get some information about the autopsy, and what he discovered actually quite pisses me off right now. Because what he learned is that this assistant actually removed the inner organs of Miguel and Manuel and let them simply stay on the shelf until they deteriorated. I am not sure why this happened like that. Maybe just because he was an assistant and he didn't know how to properly do an autopsy. But yeah, this means that the conclusion, no injuries or signs of violence, is actually a complete BS. We do not really know what was the state of the both bodies. Now, let's take a little step back to that day when Miguel and Manuel went up on that hill. It appears that on that same day, at around 7 p.m., a woman named Gracinda was driving her car at the foot of the same hill. She was not alone. She had her 3 children in the car too. As I said, it was 7 p.m. and then they suddenly saw something strange in the sky. The sky simply lit up and it was over the hill. So she actually stopped the car and everyone got out to observe a phenomenon that lasted for about 4 minutes. She described it as a bright oval orange object with a ring of fire, which emitted blue rays of light in many directions, moving up and down above Windham Hill. When she reached the home, she was so emotional and she couldn't wait to tell about this to her husband, Paolo. And he decides to go back and see that spot for himself, but no lights were visible anymore in that place. And so after the story broke headlines in the newspapers, Gracinda and her husband decided to finally go to the police and tell what they saw. Allegedly, the police also received some other calls from other citizens about that night, and they also had observed something in the sky. What did the police do about that information? I guess nothing, because there was no movement in regards of that. But now let's go back to the case. What did the police do? So they decided to talk to the people who were living the closest to the crime scene. The couple by the surname De Vasconcelos, I hope I pronounced it correctly, lived around 200 meters away from where the men were found. And the couple said that they do not actually live in that house. They were just like supervising the repairs for the owners, and so they didn't actually know anything about what happened that night, and they didn't see anything suspicious happening that night. But the police do decide to investigate a little bit the home of where this couple is living and supervising the repairs. What they find is a notable amount of images and statues of different saints in the house, but the couple denies that they are related to Spiritism and its practices. Why this is important in context of today's story? Well, in Brazil, there's a belief system called Spiritism or Espiritismo, which is based on the 19th century teachings of a Frenchman named Allan Kardec. Followers of this are called Kardecists. We will hear this name further. It is not the same as Christianity, even though many Spiritists still call themselves Catholic. Spiritism is more like a spiritual philosophy that believes the soul survives death, can reincarnate, and that we can communicate with spirits who live on another plane. In Brazil, Spiritism isn't a fringe belief. It's actually mainstream. There are Spiritist centers all over the country, and millions of Brazilians visit them for healing, guidance, or contact with spirits. Spiritism in Brazil often includes the idea that spirits can communicate through energy, light, or even radio waves, and that people can prepare themselves to receive these messages. So in relation to this case, this is important because one of the ideas, as you will see further, is that both men were into these kind of teachings and things. What the police does next is that they wanted to trace back the lives of Miguel and Manuel up to the moment when they passed away, because they believed that this would help them understand and translate the state of these men at the moment when they found them on the top of the hill. So Bittencourt, which is the main person responsible for this investigation, travels to Campos, the place where both of the men lived together with their wives. So they go there. After interrogations, they end up arresting a man named Elcio, and they take him in to interrogate. So we already heard this name before, one of the dudes with whom Miguel and Manuel were doing experiments on the beach. So who is he? Well, he is a very important person in this case, in my opinion, and there's a huge involvement, I must say. So let me break it down for you. Well, Elcio was actually a good friend of Manuel and Miguel, as we already established. He often helped them in their TV repair shop, and in fact, it was revealed that he was also in the bus station before Miguel and Manuel went to their journey to climb that hill. So why was he here to say goodbyes or what? Did he know about their plan? We don't know. Anyways, I think at this point, the police got suspicious that all of this is related to some kind of spiritist cult or ritual. And this Elcio actually was an avid believer into spirits. And I quote Elcio.
I have always been friends with both of them. Elza, Miguel's wife, can testify to this. Miguel, her husband, was close to me. As for Manuel, we knew he was going through a hard time, not financially but morally, and we tried to bring him back to the right path. As a believing Kardecist, I tried to pull him in touch with benevolent spirits, as it was with his intention that I took him to a few sessions to the Spiritism Center. That was all. When I said goodbye to them at the bus station, I was sure that they were really going to São Paulo. From that day on, I know nothing more.
So what he was saying is that he was the one actually who pulled both of the men in those Kardecist things about spiritualism, actually. So, and I also think that this Elcio guy is not telling everything. He's quite suspicious because during the interrogation, Elcio was asked about the Atafona explosion, you know, the one that I mentioned at the beginning. And to that question, he said that basically Miguel and Manuel were the main masterminds behind that event on that night. And yes, he was there, but he was just invited by the both men as simply a spectator of the show. In the first testimony, he actually says that they went to Atafona Beach in Miguel's car. Later, he changed his story and he said that Miguel's car broke, and this is why they ended up going on Elcio's car. I already told you that I don't trust Elcio. He is a really suspicious guy, but at the end, the police could not tie anything to him because he also apparently had a pretty solid alibi. He was saying that he was repairing a car nearby his house, and there were a couple of witnesses who saw that, and those witnesses actually, yes, came forward and said that, yes, we saw Elcio repairing his car. So they had to let Elcio go. But then there was another man whose name was Valdir, and he also worked in the shop together with Miguel and Manuel. But he had a completely different story to tell about this Elcio guy, and also about the Atafona mystery. He said Elcio lied about Atafona experiment to the police. According to him, Elcio and the three men, Miguel, Manuel, and also himself, Valdir, were invited by him to go to the Atafona beach to watch something supernatural. So, but he didn't disclose any kind of details about what this supernatural actually is. He said they all went by car from campus to Atafona on that night, and when they got there on the beach, Elcio went a bit far away from their sight, and the three of them, Miguel, Manuel, and Valdir himself, just stood there and waited for like 10 minutes. He did not know where Elcio went and what he was doing during these 10 minutes, but he came back running. And after he came back running, they saw a huge red-purple light come down towards the water. Elcio urged them to enter the car and get out of that place as fast as possible because something bad was about to happen. Valdir remembered a strong smell of sulfur in the air, and he did not hear any kind of explosion at that time. So Valdir also told the police that Elcio was a practitioner of spiritualism. Well, he already said that to the police, but Valdir wanted the police to know that he was way, way more cray-cray than just a simple spiritualism practitioner. According to Valdir, Elcio often said he was possessed by a certain spirit, and sometimes he was called Dr. Paulo, sometimes he was called Dr. Samuel. That was like the spirit that was possessing him on that moment. And Elcio also allegedly had a great influence on Miguel and Manuel because like he was a guy who was possessed by spirits and he was a lot like wiser than them. So Valdir recalled one anecdote where Elcio had borrowed money from Miguel, but later he refused to give this money back, saying that, I quote, "A mermaid from the river took my money," and Miguel believed and accepted it, so he didn't have to give back the money. Also, Walder did mention that sometimes they would gather in the repair shop and have some spiritual or spiritist sessions, and they would really believe that LCO, when possessed, could help them with their health issues and overall issues in their life. So that was how it went on. Miguel and LCO allegedly, according to Walder, were the most passionate ones about these spiritual things. Manuel was a little bit more skeptical. Allegedly, few days before his mysterious death on the mountain on August of 17th, in one of their sessions, he would say to LCO, I quote, that is according to Walder,
"I am going to watch a definite experiment. After that, I will be able to tell you if I believe it or not."
I guess this was about that experiment they were about to do on the top of that mountain. So I guess he was saying that if this experiment shows or proves something, then I will be like more avid believer into spirits. And to tell more about Atafona mystery, maybe that Atafona Beach mystery was actually the first rehearsal of what they were about to do on the top of that hill. And there was another person who was interrogated by the police, and it was Manuel's wife, Nelly. And she had confirmed that she knows that her husband actually was there on Atafona Beach and he did something, but she didn't disclose any kind of details. And she also confirmed that she saw her husband and Miguel making the lead masks one day before they left, as they said, to São Paulo, but they didn't go there. We already know that. So when the wife Nelly asked him about what they are making, Manuel just replied that this is something that they need for work. After searching the family's house, the police searched the family's house, they found the cutout pieces of lead that matched the holes on the masks over the nose. So they were like really making those masks at home. Also, they found the same type of lead masks in the TV shop where they worked. So probably they were also rehearsing in the repair shop, preparing for the trip up on the hill to use those masks. Also, another neighbor came forward saying that he saw how these guys were making these masks out of lead pipe. And when he was asking what they were doing, at first, both of the men were kind of silent. And then when the neighbor became more persistent and asked again, what you're doing, just tell me what you're doing, one of them replied, and I quote,
"We are creating something that will prevent the end of the world in the year 1968, when the Great Cyclone will devastate a large part of our planet."
So they continued to ignore the neighbor and continued their work on whatever they were doing. I guess these were the lead masks, so pretty weird. And to be honest, this already starts to sound like a little cult for me, because they usually operate with this apocalyptic idea to get people in. Is LCO behind that? We don't know, but it sounds a little bit like that. But who am I? I don't understand anything. I'm just a simple YouTuber here. But one of the Miguel's sisters said, I quote,
"Miguel often told me about a very important experiment he was going to make. In the last few days, as he seemed quiet, with a varied expression on his face, I soon realized that the moment had come. Then he went on a southern trip in the company of Manuel. Why? I still don't know exactly what happened, but I know that it has all to do with the seemingly meaningless things he used to tell me."
Mr. Amaro, Miguel's father, also was a devoted practitioner of Spiritism, and he remembers a conversation with son when Miguel said, and I quote,
"I am certain that Earth is not the only inhabited planet. Many other planets are as well. I am currently studying the subject, and I am increasingly convinced that the possibilities of man reaching another inhabited world are much greater and easier than one might imagine."
Because the nature of this case was so bizarre, the police requested to do a proper analysis of these lead masks, and the Engineering Institute of the Army stated that the masks did not contain any radioactive material. But there is another story that's circulating, allegedly. When the investigator, Mr. Bittencourt, examined these masks, he immediately got an allergic reaction. It is alleged that he immediately got red spots all over his body. Maybe this is a coincidence and maybe this story is invented. I don't know, but I just thought I will put it out there. And then the police also paid attention to the notes and the instructions in the notes. And after talking to the families and friends and the rest of the people who knew the guys, it was concluded that the way how these words were organized and how this was written down, this was not how Miguel and Manuel would usually communicate or write down something for that matter. This led to a theory that maybe somebody else wrote down these instructions and the rest of the stuff on these notes and that they were not written by Miguel and Manuel themselves, but who was the person who wrote that? We don't know because as far as I did my research, the police did not go through with any kind of handwriting analysis of the notes. I would be betting like 50% that this could be Elsio's handwriting, but who am I again to say that? Okay, so while searching the TV shop where the men worked, the police found actually, and that's my cat again, commenting the case, found a very interesting book that was called Vida no Planeta Marte, or in translation, Life on Planet Mars. And it was filled with a lot of written notes. And there, Hercilio Maes, I hope I pronounced it correctly, the author of the book, says that the text in the book was dictated to him by a spiritual entity named Ramatis. This book informs us that Mars is an inhabited planet and describes it in a great details, many aspects of the Martian civilization: family, education, culture, religion, entertainment, technology, industry, transportation, government, among others. There are chapters in the book called Airships, Spaceships, Flying Saucers that talks about Martian spaceship technology, interplanetary voyages and reincarnation. So I'm giving you these titles so you understand the content of the book. There, in this book, the author explains that the spirit of a human being that dies on the Earth can be reincarnated as a Martian, but native Martians can tell if a fellow native is a real native or it's a foreigner that has reincarnated from the Earth, if you know what I mean. So, in this book, also the author reveals how a Martian device, aka UFO, would look if one would come, let's say, down to the planet Earth. And I quote, "Its usual color is between orange, pink, and salmon, and sometimes pure turquoise. Its appearance in terms of material would give you the idea of polished aluminum or steel, since the surface is absolutely smooth and soft, giving the impression of being wonderfully waxed. The entire device is built with the vitreous substance to which we have already referred, resistant to more than 6,000 degrees of heat, and your machine guns, however powerful, would not make a scratch on the armor." Then the author says that these vehicles or UFOs can fly sideways, they can float, have a special gravity, and emit a humming sound when flying. And I quote, "The powerful radioactive surface is capable of disintegrating any Earth vehicle or aircraft." So, yeah. I can comment here only the fact that this just explains what are the things that Miguel and Manuel were probably believing and what inspired their experiments. But yeah, both of them are dead. Okay, they might be brainwashed by someone, but I think we also have to understand that this looks like somebody clearly helped them to plan all of this, and that someone might possibly be still alive. Who? Another really puzzling mystery that I already mentioned, that among the things that I found with the men on the crime scene, if I can call it like that, was a handkerchief with initials AMS. So the police already did their research and they understood that this did not belong to any of the men and any of the family members or friends of them. So to whom is this handkerchief belonging and who is this AMS? And also, if you remember, Miguel had a wristwatch in his clothes, but apparently it also did not belong to him because his wife showed that Miguel's watch actually stayed at home in Campos. And she showed that watch to the police. But in the bar where they purchased the water, the bartender remembered that Miguel was checking the watch for some time. So already there, he had some kind of watch, and that probably was the watch that they found inside the clothes. And now, with knowing all of that, with having all of those questions, let's talk about some of the hypotheses of what could have happened. So let's start with the most practical one and build up towards the most craziest and most mysterious, I guess. So I think we can surely discard the self-exit option here, because they did not have any reason. Their life was okay. They had their families. They had their shops. There was no drama, no real money problems. They also clearly planned to return. Remember, they were waiting for the receipt from the bartender because they were planning to come back and return some money for the bottle. So why would they do all of that if they were planning to self-exit on that day? Another version is that maybe they were spies. They clearly were experts in electronics. They were secretive. They met up with two other friends regularly in the shop. Maybe under saying they having spiritual sessions, they were actually talking about some spy stuff. Or I don't know, but like something that a spy would do. And also they were found on the top of a hill that is pretty isolated, not crowded, and ideal maybe for catching some transmissions or meeting up with some other spies. And now the most interesting theory, spiritual experiment gone wrong. Yes, let's look into that. Did they want to reach the spirit world or try to call out an alien or UFO? Now, the police realized when they analyzed the timeline that there is a little gap of time in between the time when they reached the bus stop in Niteroi and the time when they visited their friend in his electronics shop and asked for the spare parts, that they knew already that it's not in stock there. So the police concluded that they might have been a time for them to meet somebody or go somewhere where they could have picked up those notes or those instructions. And what the police learns is that in between the bus station and the friend's shop, there is actually one spiritism center located nearby. And it is speculated that they might have visited that center, and there they had the further instructions of what they are supposed to do. And this probably led to this great disaster that also made them die on the top of the hill. Now, time passes and the police do not have certain answers to anything in relation to this case. And in the year 1967, district attorney assigned a new investigator and demanded exhumation of the bodies of Miguel and Manuel. The experts analyzing the remains concluded the bodies had received an excess of formaldehyde. And because of that, it is not possible to perform proper toxicology analysis. So that is like a natural thing that occurs in dead bodies, as far as I understood, and that prevented to do the toxicology analysis. So this is why the death of Miguel and Manuel still remains unknown, and of course, because of that assistant who fucked everything up. In the year 1968, bones and tissue collected during this exhumation were sent to the Institute of Atomic Energy of São Paulo as a last measure of trying to truly identify the cause of death. And although Midway lost somewhere in the mail, the results came in and show no radiation. Basically, we're again at the dead end, and we still can ask the same questions. How they passed away, did they saw something, and what really happened? But let me confuse you a little bit more. In the year 1968, a photographer, Ari Pereira, captured an image of an identified flying object over Windham Hill. That's the hill where both of these guys were found. And the object stays still for a few minutes and then goes away at great speed, according to him. Ari explained that the object emitted a silver light so intense that he had to use a yellow filter on his camera. Many other people in Niteroi also saw the same object. Now, this just adds to the mystery. So some weird stuff is still happening even after both of these men died there. Maybe this hill is like a hot spot for aliens. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised knowing the Virginia story from Brazil, because seems like in Brazil there's a lot of places that have these mysteries. In the year 1980, this case also drew attention to some UFO research giants, if I can say like that. And by that, I mean Jacques Vallée. Do your own research, but in short, he is an academic that has worked for NASA and a leading expert in the UFO phenomena. He comes to Brazil to investigate the case. He climbs Vintém Hill, talks to the police detectives and reporters that cover the case. He notes that the spot where the bodies were found is barren. Grass had not grown since. The results of his investigations becomes the prologue of his book, Confrontations: A Scientist's Search for Alien Contact. And he mentions also the case in other publications. For example, I quote, "Men who were known to be engaged in an effort to conduct flying saucers were found dead on a hillside with no apparent sign of violence. Several witnesses had reported a strange luminous disc over the site the same evening when they died. This opens up a much wider enigma that I had suspected when I first read the notice of it in a French newspaper. It takes the subject beyond everything of Blue Book." So Jacques Vallée really believed that this was indeed a UFO case. However, I must remind you of all of the loose ends, of all of the questions and the lack of explanation of all the things that were around these bodies. So this is a theory for UFO believers, and I cannot say that this is definitely it. But what I am curious, though, is that what do you think about this case? What happened to Manuel and Miguel? Did they really try to contact a UFO, or maybe they were disturbed by the UFOs and this is why they died? Maybe this was an experiment gone wrong because of their beliefs in spirits, and because they were probably part of some kind of cult. And maybe LCO knows more, and up until nowadays we don't know anything because LCO kept his mouth shut. And also I am still pissed about the autopsy that went wrong, because this might have provided a lot of answers to some of the questions. What were the capsules that they were supposed to take that were mentioned in the notes? Because if they had proper autopsy, we might see some traces of some kind of substances that they had in these capsules. Maybe they were poisoned, but who would be interested in poisoning them? And also there's an option of sacrifice, because remember, the leaves on their bodies, they were organized in a certain way, and somebody had chopped the leaves and placed them there. So maybe it was indeed a sacrifice. Then to whom? To the spirits? Again, leading back to the cults. Or maybe they were sacrificing to the UFOs, aliens. I don't know. So write down in comments what are your thoughts about this case. Have you heard about this case before? And I apologize for my cat's behavior today. She was pretty active and now she's sleeping. And at the end, again, just reminding you that your support means a lot. My views are going down, so make sure you press the like, write a comment, share this video with whoever would be interested in hearing this story. Thank you to my husband who made this a little bit different studio today. And also shout out to David Craig, my first Patreon. Hi, hope you have a lovely day. And if you want to have a shout out, do subscribe to my Patreon, link down there. Apart from that, stay curious and have a lovely day. Bye. Yeah. Oh, okay. What do you think about it?